Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We're making our way through volumes 2 through 13 of this book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. We're in volume 3, chapters 41 through 50. And what we do in this class is we will typically meditate prior to actually starting the learning part. We'll do a brief meditation just to kind of prepare the mind for the class ahead. Then we'll go into the learning part where a student or a volunteer or sometimes me will read each individual chapter. And after the chapter is read, then I'll share some teachings on that and then open up to any questions that you guys have. This is more of a study group where we come together to study, and students have typically already studied these chapters prior to class because you have the words of the Buddha, you have the reference back to the original Pali Canon, and then you have the words that I've shared with you as reflections to help you further reflect on the words of the Buddha and understand them and then apply them to your practice in daily life. So I'd like to welcome you, whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been joining us regularly, and invite you to join for meditation, and you're welcome to stay for the rest of the class as well. Right now, we're live streaming out to Facebook, YouTube. We're recording for our podcast, and there's some other places that we're live streaming to as well. As we are conducting the class, you're welcome to ask questions. You can put that into the Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom sections. There's a comment section there, and we'll be able to see your questions and be sure they get answered during the class. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So welcome, and if you'd like to join for meditation, you can go ahead and take a nice position, either sitting on the floor or sitting in a chair. It's really up to you. The seated position tends to be kind of the go-to position for people to start with meditation. You'd like your lower body and the hands and arms to be completely relaxed. The upper body should be erect. And then just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. I'm going to do some chanting to ease us into meditation. You're welcome to join along in these chants if you like. There's nothing mystical or magical about these chants. It's just to help ease the mind into meditation. And then I'll be back with some brief guidance to help you further get into meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato พุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, you'd like to just take some nice breaths in through the nose and out through the nose. Your breath isn't going to necessarily match up with the guidance that I provide. So wherever you get to the inhale, just breathe in gradually through the nose. And whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Here you're just establishing a nice, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just gradually breathing in through the nose. And exhaling out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath or the sensation of air moving into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Then, whenever you notice that the mind is off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to label the thought, observe it, or analyze it. Just cut it off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสักขะโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to make your way out of meditation, we're going to go ahead and transition over to our class of the Pali Canon and English Study Group. This is where we study the words of the Buddha in this book series titled The Words of the Buddha. And we're in volume 3, moving through 10 chapters a week. We're at chapter 41 now, and we're moving towards chapter 50 throughout this class. So the way that we normally do the class is a student will volunteer to read a chapter, and then as you volunteer to read the chapter, after you read the chapter, I will open up to teaching and just kind of sharing some teachings with you guys, and then open up to any questions that you guys might have related to the teachings that I shared. So if there's someone in Zoom who would like to read this first chapter, you can just electronically raise your hand, and then I'll be able to call on you to be able to read this chapter. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone's raising their hand, so I'll go ahead and read the first chapter. Oh, there we go. Donnie's raising his hand. So yeah, Donnie, if you'd like to go ahead and read this first chapter, that'd be great.
Chapter 41. A snake has passed through feces. And what kind of person, monks, is to be considered unwholesome, not to be associated with, followed, and served? Here, some person is immoral, of unwholesome character, impure, of suspect behavior, secretive in his action, not an aesthetic, through claiming to be one, not a celebrate, though claiming to be one, inwardly rotten, corrupt, wicked. Such a person is considered unwholesome, not to be associated with, followed, and served. For what reason? Even though one does not follow the example of such person, an unwholesome report still circulates about oneself. He has unwholesome friends, unwholesome companions, unwholesome comrades. Just as a snake that has passed through feces, though it does not bite one, would smear one, so too, through one that does not follow the example of such a person. An unwholesome report still circulates about oneself. He has unwholesome friends, unwholesome companions, unwholesome comrades. Therefore, such a person is to be looked upon with object, not to be associated with, followed, and served.
All right. Thank you, Donnie. So remember, the Buddhist teachings is all about sharing with you the natural laws of existence, and namely the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. He's exposing you to what you're going to experience in this world in terms of this cause and effect, or action and result. In each one of his teachings, he's guiding you in order to help you see the wisdom behind being able to make wise decisions that would lead to wholesome results. Because when we are unknowing of true reality of this natural law of karma, we will make unwise decisions that lead to certain unwholesome results. So you're gradually learning, slowly but surely, about this natural law of karma. And a student would have already had a foundation of the teachings to be able to understand through our group learning program and some of our other classes, courses, and retreats. And now in the Pali Canon and English study group, you're learning some of the detailed teachings related to the words of the Buddha. And here he's talking about this snake who passes through feces. And he's using this analogy to help you understand about selecting certain individuals who you might choose to spend time with and associate with and be friends or associated with, or maybe even if you're going to take a job and have a certain boss or coworkers, or live in a certain neighborhood or associate with certain people. You should never put yourself in a situation where you're judging others, where you're looking down on them, or you're looking up to people. You just look at all people as equal. That's the best way to train your mind, to look at all beings as equal. However, there's certain decision making that you would like to make. So judgment would be looking down on people or looking up to people, thinking you're above them or thinking you're below them. But there's a certain amount of discernment. That discernment is wise decision making. That when you learn the wisdom of the Buddha and this natural law of karma, you're going to start learning in certain situations for yourself in your own practice about things like killing and stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, substances that cause heedlessness, and various aspects of this natural law of karma. And you would like to improve your decision making so that you experience improved results in life. And part of that is associating with wholesome friends or companions or comrades, certain associates. And here the Buddha is explaining to you that if you associate with people who are into unwholesome things, that it's going to cause difficulties in your life. So here he's mainly talking in this particular teaching, and a lot of his teachings, he's talking to ordained practitioners, but there's household practitioners that he's teaching to. He just tends to kind of address the monks because those were the ones who were learning with him most closely. He's saying, what kind of person, monks, is considered unwholesome, not to be associated with, followed, or served? Some person is immoral. This means the moral conduct section of that eightfold path that you learn about right speech, right action, and right livelihood. There he's exposing to you the natural law of karma, and you're improving your moral conduct to be practicing those teachings. So if you involve people in your life that are doing detrimental things in the world, that are immoral, your association with them is going to cause difficulties. Same thing, he says, unwholesome character, impure, suspect behavior, secretive in their actions, right? If somebody's very secretive. Now here, this is during the lifetime of the Buddha, and even now, there's people who claim that they are an ordained practitioner, but they're really not. And if you can imagine, during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people who were ordaining to learn how to get to enlightenment. And there were people who were put on a robe and claim that they're ordained practitioner, but they're actually not. And there's actually people like that today that are out there in the world that put on Buddhist clothing and robes and things like this and claim that they're an ordained practitioner when they're actually really not. And he talks about someone who says that they're celibate and they're truly not, because as an ascetic, a monk, an ordained practitioner, they're going to no longer have sex. And if somebody's claiming that they're no longer having sex, but they still are having sex, this is of course a lie. And he's explaining inwardly rotten, corrupt, and wicked. Well, you can look at people in your life that if you see, killing or stealing, sexual misconduct, lies, deceit, slander, gossip, argumentative speech, if you're seeing people that are drunk and using drugs and alcohol, this is all going to cause difficulties in your life if you associate with this kind of individuals, because they're not going to have the wise decision making. They're not going to have the wisdom that they need in order to conduct their life in a wholesome way that's going to promote beneficial results and beneficial outcomes for them. So if you choose to associate with these kinds of people, again, we're not judging them, we're not looking down on them, but it's just wise decision making that it would be unwise for you to associate with this type of person, because it's going to cause difficulties. Because if they are making unwise decisions in their life and you're choosing to be involved in their life, now you're going to experience the results of that. And the Buddha explains some of those results here, where he says, even if one does not follow the example of such a person, meaning that maybe another person is being immoral, but you're not, because this is one of the challenges in associating with people who are doing unwholesome things, is your mind will have a tendency to move in that direction. You'll have a tendency to do unwise things and unwholesome things if you associate with people in that way. But even if you choose not to do those things, but you still associate with this person, the Buddha is explaining that an unwholesome report circulates about you, meaning that you are experiencing this detrimental and degrading aspect to your reputation. That the reputation that you will build is that you have unwholesome friends, unwholesome companions, and unwholesome comrades. In other words, people are going to look at you and the choices that you make about the people that you spend time with. Even though you're not judging others, other people are going to judge you, and they're going to look down on you for having unwholesome friends or companions or comrades. And this is going to affect your personal and professional life, that you're going to have challenges to conduct yourself in personal relationships and professional relationships where you're experiencing beneficial outcomes and wholesome outcomes. And the Buddha explains this through, just as a snake passes through feces, though it does not bite you, it would smear you. And this is what the Buddha is describing about this snake, that even though you might not get bitten by this snake that you might choose to spend time with, it can smear you with this feces because it's moved through this feces. And it would be unwise to associate with somebody who's doing these unwholesome things, because it's like they're smeared based on the decisions that they're making. Again, not judging, just looking at wise decisions. Like, for example, if you had a friend who was selling cocaine and crystal meth and all this stuff, and even though you don't sell drugs, even though you might not even use drugs, if you associate with this person, say you guys are driving down the street and a police officer pulls you over, and when you're not looking, your friend tosses the drugs underneath of your seat in the car. Well, if the police officer searches the car, you're going to jail. You're going to get a lot of trouble for having these drugs, even though you have nothing to do with those drugs whatsoever. This is how a person can smear you, even though they haven't bitten you necessarily. So it's wise to cultivate wholesome friends, companions, and comrades so that you're protecting your ability to maintain wholesomeness in your life. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I will see that in the comment section. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. Looks like Donnie has his hand up. You can go ahead and ask your question, Donnie.
Teacher, I noticed that there's a question on Facebook. It says from Santosh Lama. It says that, does the posture play role in meditation?
There is an aspect of your posture that you would like to have in order to meditate. There's 4 different positions. So even though this isn't about this particular chapter, I'll go ahead and answer your question for you. There's seated position, lying position, standing position, and walking position. And you would use each one of these positions depending on what you're trying to accomplish in your meditation. And I go in detail on this in the group learning program. If you look on our YouTube channel and you look for chapter 11, or you just get the book and download it and read chapter 11, you will see where I explain all the 4 different positions and in which situation you might decide to use each individual position. That's good you're seeing that, Donnie, because I don't see that question in my Facebook. So thank you for bringing that up. I don't see any questions in YouTube. I don't see any in Facebook either. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next chapter. The next chapter is chapter 42. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this chapter? All right, if nobody's... Oh, there we go. Donnie's going to read that one. Go ahead, Donnie.
6 aspects of karma to be understood. Monks, when it is said, karma should be understood, the creation of karma should be understood. The diversity of karma should be understood. The result of karma should be understood. The elimination of karma should be understood. The way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma should be understood. For what reason was this said? It is volition, choices, decisions, monks, that I call karma. For having willed, intentional choices or decisions, one acts by body, speech, of mind. And what is the creation of karma? Contact is its creation. And what is the diversity of karma? There is karma to be experienced in hell. There's karma to be experienced in the animal realm. There's karma to be experienced in the realm of afflicted spirits. There is karma to be experienced in the human realm. And there is karma to be experienced in the heavenly realm. This is called the diversity of karma. And what is the result of karma? The result of karma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. This is called the result of karma. And what monks is the elimination of the creation of karma. With the elimination of contact, there is elimination of the creation of karma. This Noble Eightfold Path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma, namely, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When monks, a noble disciple, thus understands karma, the creation of karma, the diversity of karma, the result of karma, the elimination of the creation of karma, and the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma, he understands this penetrative spiritual life to be the elimination of unwholesome karma. When it is said, karma should be understood, the creation of karma should be understood, the diversity of karma should be understood, the result of karma should be understood, the elimination of the creation of karma should be understood. The way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma should be understood. It is because of this that this was said.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. So in order to get to enlightenment, an individual needs to deeply understand the natural law of karma, this cause and effect. And in the group learning program, I have that chapter 9 where I spend time explaining about new karma and old karma, as well as wholesome karma and unwholesome karma. And we go through that in detail and we explain all the different facets to help you get started with understanding the natural law of karma. And then in reality, all the teachings that the Buddha is sharing in one way or another are helping you to gain further understanding of this natural law of karma. Without this understanding or wisdom of the natural law of karma, you wouldn't be able to actually progress to enlightenment. What the mind is unknowing of when we talk about this unknowing of true reality and that it experiences unwholesome results in life is because the mind is unknowing of this natural law of karma, of cause and effect. So all throughout the teachings of the Buddha, he's explaining this natural law to you and helping you see it more and more clearly so that then you can navigate your decisions based on this wisdom. That when you make wise decisions, it'll lead to wholesome results. And when you make unwise decisions, it will lead to unwholesome results. So here he's talking about the natural law of karma itself in detail to help you understand these 6 aspects of this natural law. So the first thing to understand is that when you have intentional choices and decisions, this is what is going to produce karma. When you act with body, speech, and mind. So if you went outside and you intentionally killed another person, or you intentionally stole, or has sexual misconduct, or lying, or having substances that cause heedlessness, these are intentional choices and decisions that are by body, speech, and mind, and it's going to produce some kind of result for you. And if you are practicing those 5 precepts, since I'm using those to help you because the 5 precepts are essentially helping you to see the natural law of karma, if you're practicing those closely, you won't be generating unwholesome karma related to those particular decisions. But when we don't practice those, then you're going to be producing unwholesome karma because you're making these intentional choices in order to either kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, lie, or take substances that cause heedlessness. But at the same time, if you went outside and you were just walking down the street and there was an ant under your foot and it happened to die as a result of you just walking, you didn't even know it was there. You haven't intentionally chosen to kill this ant, so there isn't any unwholesome results. Oftentimes this word Gama takes on this mystical, magical thing where people think that, there's almost like this black cloud following you around, or these punishments or rewards. It's essentially cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. With this one particular teaching that I'm talking about, killing, the aspect of this teaching that the Buddha teaches in the first precept is he talks about living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And what this is doing is ensuring that you're not making decisions to kill others, because when you make decisions to kill others, people are going to be interested in harming you and hurting you. So if you clean up your decision making and no longer choose to harm others, then harm won't come to you. But in a situation where you have intentionally gone out and killed, there's a certain amount of anger, hatred, or ill will that's in the mind. And therefore, because of making the decision through that anger, hatred, and ill will, it's going to produce unwholesome results. But in the situation where you walk out on the street and you're just walking down the sidewalk and there happens to be an ant or a spider under your foot and you didn't even know about it, you haven't intentionally made the choice to kill that ant. So you're not practicing with anger, hatred, and ill will. You're just walking down the street, and it's just the nature of this being. Because if you were obsessive about this, you would walk around with a broom and sweep in front of you and make sure there's absolutely no insect whatsoever anywhere you walked. And this is impractical. It's not possible for you to go through life this way. So it comes down to your intentions, and what is your intention behind what you're actually doing. So here, this is something to understand as it relates to Gama, that there has to be intention behind your choice and decision in order for you to produce some type of Gama, because you would be functioning through perhaps craving, anger, and ignorance, or you're functioning through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. These are called the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 wholesome roots. And what you would like to do is function more and more through those wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Because when you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, you're going to be making unwise choices. These intentional choices through body, speech, and mind, coming through craving, anger, and ignorance, are always going to produce unwholesome results. Then the second thing to understand is that the way you create Gama is through contact. If you have contact with another being, you're creating Gama. So let's just say your life partner, you come in contact with a life partner, or a friend, or your mom or your dad. When you come into contact with them and you start speaking, if you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, you're producing wholesome Gama, for example, because you're making a wise decision to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. And it's that contact that is allowing you to then create the Gama with that person. Whereas if you were impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, you're now going to create unwholesome Gama, because you're making unwise choices that are going to lead to unwholesome results based on this contact with you and that person. Now, the way that you can actually use this to understand it is not only in the simple way that I've talked about here, but if you're in a conversation with somebody and you see that the conversation is blowing up, or it's about to blow up into an argument, the way that you stop the Gama that's being created there is you break contact. You eliminate contact. By you walking away from the situation, you're no longer creating Gama in that situation. Whereas if you were to stay there and you were to be argumentative and frustrated and irritated, and you started throwing things with your bodily actions, and you started stomping your foot and things like this is going to continue to produce Gama, because you're having contact with this being and you're making unwise decisions, which is going to produce unwholesome results. So in a situation where you see that either your mind or another person's mind is becoming a little bit unraveled, it's oftentimes best to just walk away and break contact, because then you're no longer creating Gama. Then there's Gama that is going to be experienced in each of the individual realms. And right now, you're in the human realm. We've all experienced countless births, and if you haven't observed your past lives yet, this is something that some people have insight into, that they've actually observed their past lives. And this is how the Buddha knew, and other people know, that these realms are indeed 100% the truth, that these exist, is because you can observe your past lives in these various realms. And from observing your past lives in these various realms and the experiences that you're experiencing in those realms, this is the results of your decisions. So no matter what realm you're in, you're going to experience the results of your decisions. And the Buddha goes into the results of that are to be experienced in this life, the next life, or some subsequent occasion. Essentially, he's saying between these two statements that you can't run and hide from your karma. Whatever unwise decisions you make, you're going to experience that in this life, the next life, or some future life. And even if you're reborn into a different realm of existence, whether you're now human, if you were to be reborn into one of these other realms, you're going to experience the results of whatever decisions that you've made. So the next decision becomes, well, how do I eliminate the creation of all this unwholesome karma so that I can now escape all of these unwholesome results that I'm experiencing? So he says, with the elimination of contact, there is elimination of the creation of karma. And that's what we were talking about previously in number 2, that when you break contact, you're no longer producing karma, either wholesome karma or unwholesome karma. You're not creating any karma at all when you're separated from another person or another being. But then it's, how do you eliminate all your unwholesome karma? Well, that's the Eightfold Path. When you learn the Eightfold Path and you bring your practice up closer and closer to that, you're only making wise decisions, which is only going to produce wholesome results. But because you've made unwise decisions in the past, you're going to experience that old karma coming back to you. So if you were able to snap your fingers and instantly start practicing the teachings of the Buddha right now to perfection, which you can't, but if you were able to do that, you would still experience unwholesome results because you made unwholesome decisions, unwise decisions in the past, and those things are going to need to come back and affect you now in this life. So what you're doing is you're gradually increasing your wise decisions through learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, and more as this unwholesome results from the past is coming back to you, you're now dealing with that differently. Where in the past, maybe when your life partner or your children or your friends or family would yell and holler and be hostile with you, you might have been argumentative and yell and holler and be hostile back. But when you start learning this path to enlightenment, things like right view, right intention, right speech, and others, you might now have more control over your mind, and you're choosing to no longer be argumentative back to them. But because you were argumentative with them in the past, they're going to continue to be argumentative with you now, because you can't just snap your fingers and extinguish all those unwise decisions, all those different arguments that you've been into. People are going to continue to argue with you because that's what they've gotten used to. So you're going to need to break contact and go away and train your mind to be restrained so that you're no longer being argumentative. Because if somebody picks up a rubber ball and they throw it in the room and you just watch the ball roll into the corner and it loses its energy, now the argument dies out and it loses its energy. But if you pick up the ball and you throw it around the room, and then they pick up the ball and throw it around the room, and you pick up the ball and throw it around the room, this argumentative nature of the conversation is going to keep going back and forth and back and forth. So the way that you extinguish your unwholesome karma is you learn to practice this Eightfold Path, bringing your decisions up closer and closer to these wise decisions that you would make through practicing all of these individual factors. And this is something that you would need to learn using the words of the Buddha, which this book series has that. So if you learn in volume 1, chapter 4 and 5, you will learn this Eightfold Path. And I've done classes on this where they've been recorded in Facebook, YouTube, and our podcast. And I continue to teach classes, courses, and retreats where I'm sharing this content using the words of the Buddha and helping you learn how to implement this. Because as you do, you'll see the improvements in the condition of your mind and the condition of your life as you're making wiser and wiser decisions based on the Eightfold Path. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Question. If one has a negative thought of ill will, but does not initiate contact, does that count as unwholesome karma? In that situation, you are actually experiencing unwholesome karma already just by having the unwholesome thought. The reason why the mind has the unwholesome thoughts is because it has certain pollutions in the mind. You haven't taken the steps in order to train the mind to eliminate the unwholesome thoughts. So in that situation, you're already experiencing unwholesome karma from the decisions of not training your mind. And now when there's unwholesome thought in the mind, if you don't act upon it, now you're not creating new karma, in a situation with a new being, but you still need to extinguish that unwholesome karma that you're experiencing in that moment within your own mind. And the way that you do that is through the Eightfold Path. When you learn the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, when you see that unwholesome thought arising, which is mindfulness, you'll have awareness of the mind that that unwholesome thought has arisen. You then apply right effort, which is to cut off and let go of that unwholesome thought that's arisen. And now more and more as you do that, you train the mind, and eventually you get to the point where there are no unwholesome thoughts that arise because you've actively trained the mind to eliminate it. So you've extinguished your unwholesome karma from the past through practicing this Eightfold Path. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you here, is that there's a certain amount of wisdom that you need to cultivate through right view and right intention. There's a certain amount of moral conduct that you need to practice through right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And then you need to learn and implement and practice the mental discipline section, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And when you do this, you'll extinguish all your unwholesome karma. But on your question, you're not producing any new karma by choosing to not act upon it. But you are still dealing with unwholesome karma from the decision of not choosing to train your mind. So you would like to learn this Eightfold Path more and more so you can eradicate those unwholesome thoughts, and then they won't arise any longer. All right, let's see if we have any questions in YouTube or Facebook. Looks like we have a question here in YouTube. If I'm correct, we do not need to accumulate good karma to achieve nibbana. The life story of Agamala, which is this murderer that he murdered 999 people, and then he ordained with the Buddha during his lifetime and he got to enlightenment. So the question is, do I need to accumulate good karma in order to achieve enlightenment? The answer is yes. In the case of the story that you're depicting, which is the 999 deaths that this person caused through murder, they were experiencing all kinds of unwholesome karma as a result of having murdered those individuals. But then once that person ordained and started training in the Eightfold Path, they started training their mind, and now they're producing wholesome karma through training their mind with the Eightfold Path. So yes, you need to extinguish your unwholesome karma. You need to produce good karma or wholesome karma in order to get to enlightenment. Enlightened being is not going to have any more unwholesome karma. So it can be extinguished through learning, reflecting, and practicing the Eightfold Path. And this individual wasn't doing that previously. That's why they were murdering. They didn't understand, and they were murdering. So they murdered 999 people, and they experienced the results of that coming back to them. But once they started learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, they were then able to extinguish all their unwholesome karma. And one of the big things that happened is when the soldiers came to look for this person and they looked for him, the Buddha said, this person essentially no longer exists, that they are now ordained and they're extinguishing all their unwholesome karma, and this person has made a transformation. So the Buddha was able to help this murderer to extinguish their karma, but of course that individual had to do the work themselves to learn and practice in order to extinguish their karma. So it's not just the ordination that extinguished the karma. The ordination was just a lifestyle change going into this womb where he was studying very closely with the Buddha. So you would need to develop all wholesome karma through making wise decisions through the Eightfold Path, and that's how you get to enlightenment, is by only making wise decisions, experiencing wholesome results, extinguishing all your unwholesome results from your previous unwise decisions. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions on YouTube, and let me check Facebook. If anybody who's logged into Zoom, if you guys have anything from Facebook, if you could let me know, because it sounds like Donnie saw a question there that I didn't see earlier. It's not showing up for me. So I don't see any questions in Facebook. I don't see any more in YouTube either. And it looks like we've handled all the Zoom questions. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 43. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? Okay, looks like Max has his hand up. Go ahead, Max.
Thank you, sir. Sorry.
No worries.
This body is old karma. Monks, this body is not yours, nor does it belong to others. It is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, choices, decisions, as something to be felt. Therein, monks, the instructed noble disciple attends carefully and closely to dependent origination itself thus. When this exists, that comes to be. When the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With elimination of this, that is eliminated. That is, with ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as conditions, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases. With the 6 sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of discontentedness. But with the remainderless fading away and elimination of ignorance comes elimination of volitional formations, choices, decisions. With the elimination of volitional formations, elimination of consciousness, all aspects of dependent origination. With the elimination of birth, aging, and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is eliminated. Such is the elimination of this whole mass of discontentedness.
All right, thank you, Max. So this is a little bit of an introduction to dependent origination. This is the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha's teachings. And here it's being connected to Gama and helping you to understand this old Gama a bit. So in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha is giving you a very short snapshot, a little glimpse into the cause of discontent feelings, which is craving, desire, attachment, that mental longing for something with a strong eagerness. Then he pulls back the layers a bit more, because once you learn the Four Noble Truths, which is the problem, the cause of the problem, the elimination, and the way forward to completely eliminate the problem, he pulls back the covers a bit more, and you learn about the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires, also referred to as the 3 poisons, where you understand it's not just craving, there's actually craving, anger, and ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality in the mind. Then he pulls back the covers a bit more, because there's certain solutions that you get there, but then he goes into more detail into the 10 fetters. These are 10 individual problems, and then there's certain solutions that are implemented to eliminate those pollutions from the mind, and thus get to enlightenment through purifying the mind and training it to no longer have those pollutions. The mind is then unconditioned. Well, the way that the Buddha teaches is he teaches this cause and effect, this action and result, that if this occurs, this is then going to happen. And then if this is happening, this is going to happen. And then this and this and this. He shows these interlinking or these dependent origination, that this thing is dependent on that, is dependent on this, is dependent on this. Because what he's explaining to you here in dependent origination is how you experience rebirth and how you experience discontentedness. But rather than just the snapshot in the Four Noble Truths, he's explaining the 12 interlinking steps that lead from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, which causes rebirth and causes discontentedness. So if you already have an understanding of the Four Noble Truths, you already have an understanding of the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots, the 3 fires. If you're starting to understand perhaps the 10 fetters, which I've taught all of these things in other classes, then the next thing would be to learn this highest, most ultimate truth, which is dependent origination. And I go into detail of what this is in Volume 5, Chapter 14, but let's just kind of look at it a little bit here to help you understand. What the Buddha is essentially putting together for you is he's showing you that this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, that the mind just lacks the wisdom. It doesn't understand things like craving. It doesn't understand in the unenlightened state that craving is what's causing your discontentedness. Because in the unenlightened state, we think that other people are causing us to be angry, or we think that other people are causing us to be frustrated or irritated or feel guilty or shameful or fearful, we tend to blame other people, or we blame the situation. It's not until we gain wisdom through learning, reflecting to independently verify and practice that we see the truth. Oh my goodness, all the discontent feelings that I'm experiencing in the unenlightened state are being caused by craving, desire, attachment. My own mind is causing these things. So gradually, slowly but surely, what you're doing is you're arising this wisdom in the mind, which antidotes this ignorance. Because when there's ignorance in the mind, then it's going to lead to choices and decisions that are unwise. That's what a volitional formation is. It's a choice or decision. So as long as you have this ignorance or unknowing of true reality, this misunderstanding, this confusion, it's going to lead to unwise decisions. And those unwise decisions are essentially going to lead to a consciousness. So he's starting to explain to you how you come into the world, how you experience rebirth. It's because of this ignorance that we've made unwise decisions, and now those unwise decisions leads to a new consciousness. And now that consciousness then finds what's called a name and form. What this essentially is it's the physical body. There's multiple aspects to this, which we'll talk about when we get to volume 5, chapter 14. I'll break it down in detail for you to explain what name and form is. But just for now, think about it as the physical body. That what the Buddha is describing here is that with ignorance, there's unwise decisions that are made, volitional formations. Those unwise decisions lead to a consciousness. And now with the creation of that consciousness, it's going to find a physical body to exist in. And now when it finds that physical body, there's going to be these 6 sense bases: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body itself, and then the mind. This is how the mind takes in content through the 6 sense bases. And if there's agreeable contact, right, because the next thing is now with these 6 sense bases, there's going to be contact through these 6 sense bases. If there's agreeable contact, or there's disagreeable contact, there's going to be some feeling that is created. This is where there's going to be pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And that is going to be based on craving. That when there's mental longing and strong eagerness for something to occur, when you have agreeable contact, you're going to experience pleasant feelings. And when you have disagreeable contact, you're going to experience painful feelings. And now with the mind having experienced these pleasant feelings and what that feels like, the happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, euphoria, the mind longs and yearns to have those pleasant feelings again. So the mind starts clinging. You cling to your boyfriend, you cling to your girlfriend, you cling to your car, you cling to some favorite food, you cling to your favorite shoes, you cling to any number of things in your life. You're holding on, wanting these things to be permanent. And now when you're holding on to these things, now the mind experiences continued existence, where you're coming back into the world multiple times over and over and over and over and over again. And this is going to produce this birth. And when there's birth, there's going to be aging, sickness, and death. Because of birth, there is aging, sickness, and death. You can't escape that as long as there's birth. When there's birth, there's going to be this impermanence that you'll experience aging, sickness, and death. And then there's going to be sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Because of this whole process, the mind is now experiencing discontentedness, and it all comes back to this ignorance. If it wasn't for this ignorance, this unknowing of true reality, you could purify the mind, you could train the mind, you could gain the wisdom to purify your mind, get to enlightenment. Then you wouldn't experience craving, then you wouldn't experience existence and birth, you wouldn't experience aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, and displeasure. There would be no discontentedness. When you fully cultivate wisdom in the teachings of the Buddha and fully purify your mind, you will not experience any discontentedness whatsoever for the rest of this life. Then you won't experience rebirth because you've eliminated all the conditions that are creating rebirth, so that you've essentially unraveled all of this. With the condition of ignorance no longer existing, because ignorance does not exist, the volitional formations that are unwise will not exist, and consciousness will not exist. There will be no name and form. There will be no more sixth sense bases. There will be no more contact. There will be no more feeling, craving, clinging, existence, birth. All aging, sickness, and death will be eliminated. Sorrow, grief, pain, and displeasure has been eliminated because you've now cultivated the wisdom and completely transformed this ignorance. And this is why when a student first starts studying with me, I will teach them to not believe anything that I say, because belief doesn't antidote ignorance. You can't antidote ignorance with belief. You need to be able to independently observe the truth for yourself and cultivate wisdom through your practice. And when you cultivate wisdom, now you're antidoting and transforming this ignorance, and you can unravel this whole chain. That's what the Buddha is explaining up here. That when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. So with the existence of ignorance, there's going to be volitional formations that are unwise. With the unwise decisions, it's going to produce a new consciousness, and so forth and so on. But when this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that is eliminated. So when this is eliminated, when ignorance is eliminated, you eliminate your choices and decisions that are unwise. And then you unravel this whole interlinking dependent origination where you eliminate birth because you've eliminated discontentedness through unraveling this whole chain of events. So this you can look at, you can study it in detail, you can independently verify it. And in volume 5, chapter 14, there's a whole lot more detail there from the Buddha and from me as well to help you understand this, because this is the highest ultimate truth that you build up to understanding. And this helps you to understand why you're guided to develop wisdom and not to believe anything. This also helps you understand why you're working to eliminate craving. That is what's going to ultimately lead to the end of discontentedness. So let me see what questions you guys have here. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. Looks like Donnie has his hand up. Go ahead, Donnie.
Teacher David, Pepeko has a question in YouTube. The question is, may I ask if LGBT people are unwholesome characters?
No, they are not. Just choosing to have a same-gender relationship isn't an unwholesome decision. This is completely normal. If you understand the universal truth of impermanence and the cycle of rebirth, that you can see that this is completely normal. That it's not possible for someone who's born into a male body to identify with being male 100% of the time. Because if everybody who is born with male sexual organs in their mind identify with being male, then that would be permanence. You know, this describes transgender individuals, people who prefer same gender relationships. It's not possible for every being who's born with male sexual organs to be interested in having sex with a female. And it's not possible for every being who's born with female sexual organs to be interested in having sex with a male. If that was true, then that would be permanence. But we understand the universal truth of impermanence. The challenge for some people who are hateful towards transgender or LGBTQ community is that their mind has anger, hatred, ill will. They are craving permanence. They're wanting every person who's born with male sexual organs to have sex with a female. And they want every female who's born with female sexual organs to have sex with a male. But that's because they're having craving, desire, attachment. The whole thing that the Buddha is explaining here. Essentially, those people who are angry, hateful, and vindictive, they're having ignorance. They don't understand what they don't understand. They don't understand the universal truth of impermanence. That it's not possible for every male and female to be interested in having sex with a member of the opposite gender. That if that was true, then we wouldn't understand the natural laws in the universal truth of impermanence. But since we understand the natural laws in the universal truth of impermanence, then we understand that it's completely normal for same-gender relationships and transgender individuals. This is all completely normal. Now, what you would like to look to is that, yes, it's not harmful to have sex with anybody that you choose to have sex with, but you would like to look at the third precept, because the Buddha there shares sexual misconduct, and he explains how we can harm through our sexual contact, where he talks about having sex with minors, he talks about having sex outside of relationships, having sex with people who are in other relationships, having multiple partners at the same time, having sex with people who are choosing to be celibate, and things like this. So just the choice to be in a same gender relationship or other aspects of LGBTQ community, there's no harm in that. But then you would like to be sure that you're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship, and you're choosing to have sex with one person at a time. And then when that relationship is over, if you choose to move on to another partner, and just have one partner at a time. So there's nothing unwholesome about that type of lifestyle. You would need to be sure that you're looking at all the other teachings as well, just like any other person. Even a person who is having opposite gender relationships, they're going to need to look at that third precept too, and make sure that they're practicing in a way that's not causing harm through their sexual conduct. So, but just making the decision to be in a same gender relationship, it's completely normal. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, you can see that to be true. And if you understand the cycle of rebirth, that we've all been different beings in the past, and perhaps like right now, there's this body that is male and has male sexual organs, but I could have very easily been female in other past lives, whether they were in animal existences or human existences. So when a mind comes into this body, the mind and the body are two separate things. You can see that here. The Buddha is explaining it, that there's the consciousness and then there's the actual body, which is separate from the mind. The consciousness is the mind, name and form is the body. And when these two things come together in this existence, they're not necessarily going to match because of the universal truth of impermanence. So you can have a body with one sexual organ and the mind is identifying with something else. And this can be from that mind being multiple different genders in the past. Even though the body has male sexual organs, the mind might identify as being female. And this is what we would refer to as transgender. So this is all completely normal if you understand the teachings of the Buddha, which is the natural laws of existence that you can independently verify. Okay, do we have any other questions here? All right, I don't see any more in YouTube. Thank you, Donnie, for doing that. So let's move on to the next one, the next chapter, which is chapter 44, the 5 precepts. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, go ahead, Donnie.
The 5 precepts. 1. Abandoning the taking of life, refrain from taking of life without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. 2. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. 3. Abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relationships with women, men, who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by their teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man or woman as a sign of engagement. 4. Abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. 5. Refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness.
All right, thank you, Donnie. So I just taught this this past Sunday, in our group learning program. I went through each one of these individually, and I related it to today and helped you see this gray area, because oftentimes these precepts are translated as no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. But that's not what the Buddha said. You can see his own words here, which gives you much more illuminating language to help you understand that it's not black and white, it's not rules or commandments or anything like that, that there's a large gray area to understand and how to apply these teachings into your life. So in Volume 1, Chapter 7, I go in a lot of detail about these individual precepts and helping you to understand how to relate them to aspects of your life today. And I taught a class on that last Sunday that you could actually learn from that, where I went through in detail each individual precept. But if you guys have questions on any of these or how to apply them to specific situations, you're welcome to let me know in this class, and I will share the answer to your question. And then also, if you notice here, in addition to the reference, there's lots of descriptive text to help you understand this. And this is a description above and beyond what is in Volume 1, Chapter 7, because in there I addressed all the general aspects of these precepts, but here I also address things like insect infestations, which I don't have in Volume 1. I also address euthanasia and abortion in more detail here to help you understand more about that. So there's additional content here that will further help you understand each one of these precepts in addition to what I've shared in Volume 1. Are there any questions on these precepts or how to apply them in your life here in this class? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Donnie, should I just assume that you're looking at YouTube and Facebook?
Yes, I'm helping to take a look. Doesn't seem to be any questions there.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, so let's move to the next one, which is chapter 45. Is there someone who would like to read this? Oh, there we go. Max, go for it.
A great gift. Monks, here a noble disciple, having abandoned the destruction of life, abstains from the destruction of life. By abstaining from the destruction of life, the noble disciples give to an immeasurable number of beings freedom from fear, hospitality, and harm. He himself, in turn, enjoys immeasurable freedom from fear, hostility, and harm. This is the first gift, a great gift, highest of long-standing, traditional, ancient, untainted, and never before tainted, which is not being tainted and will not be tainted, not refused by wise ascetics and Brahmins. This is the stream of merit, stream of the wholesome nutriment of peacefulness, heavenly ripening peacefulness, conducive to heaven, that leads to what is aspired for, needed, and agreeable to one's welfare and peacefulness. The other four precepts, which are abstaining from taking of what is not given, abstaining from sexual misconduct, abstaining from lying, and abstaining from consuming substances that cause heedlessness, are repeated with the Buddha's guidance. There are, monks, these 5 gifts, great gifts, highest of long-standing, traditional, ancient, untainted, and never before tainted, which is not being tainted and will not be tainted, not refused by wise ascetics and Brahmins.
Okay, thank you, Max. So here the Buddha is essentially explaining how by you practicing the precepts, you're providing this benefit to others because you're not causing harm to others. Because if you were to kill, if you were to steal, if you were to have sexual misconduct, if you were to lie, and you were to take substances that cause heedlessness, this is going to cause harm to others, and therefore harm is going to come to you. So by choosing to practice this, the Buddha is explaining how you're giving this freedom of fear, hostility, and harm, that you're not causing this harm to others. So therefore, beings are not going to be fearful of you. They're not going to experience hostility from you. And this is a result of your decision. So when you cultivate the wisdom around the 5 precepts and you see the truth that indeed when you haven't practiced those in our life where we didn't know about these precepts and we didn't practice them, we experienced unwholesome results because of that. And we can see that very clearly. We can see the wisdom in that. And then we make choices that, hey, I'm not interested in experiencing any harm here. So what I need to do is stop causing harm to others, and therefore harm won't come to me. Right? If you slap somebody, they're probably going to slap you back, or they might get out a knife or a gun or attack you, or their friends might attack you, things like this. So the 5 precepts is a way to significantly reduce your unwholesome karma, because these are significant decisions that we make very unwise decisions sometimes when we lack the wisdom of these natural laws and these 5 precepts. So if you haven't studied the 5 precepts in detail with the words of the Buddha in the way that I detail in Volume 1, Chapter 7, it's really important that you read that and that you learn from the class that I taught there, because it's recorded. And then gradually you implement those teachings into your life, and by making those wiser decisions, you'll experience better outcomes for yourself. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. Oh, do you have anything, Donnie?
No, doesn't seem to be any questions on Facebook or YouTube.
Okay, we'll go to chapter 46. Is there someone who would like to read this?
I can read this.
Thank you, sir.
The 8 precepts. 1. I too shall abandon and abstain from the destruction of life, with the rod and weapon laid aside diligently and kindly. I too shall recite compassion towards all living beings. 2. I too shall abandon and abstain from taking what is not given. I shall accept only what is given, awaiting what is given, and be honest in mind, free of theft. 3. I too shall abandon sexual activity and observe celibacy, living apart, abstaining from sexual intercourse, common people's practice. 4. I too shall abandon, abstain from false speech. I shall be a speaker of truth, an adherent of truth, trustworthy and reliable, not a deceiver of the world. I too shall abandon and abstain from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. 6. I too shall today abstaining from eating at night and from food outside the proper place, proper time. 7. I too shall abstain from dancing, singing, instrumental music, and unsuitable shows, and from adorning and beautifying myself by wearing garlands and applying scents and fragrance. 8. I too shall abandon and abstain from the use of high and luxurious beds. I shall lie low on a low resting place, either a small bed or a straw mat.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. So the 8 precepts is a level above the 5 precepts. The 5 precepts is where people will typically get started, because that knocks down a significant amount of your unwholesome Gama production. And those plug into the Eightfold Path. With the Eightfold Path being the core central teaching, the 5 precepts will plug into that. And once you get up and running with that for a period of time and you're seeing all these results, you're getting your meditation practice up and running, you're noticing significant improvements more and more and more, you might choose to move to the 8 precepts at some point in time. It might be a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It's up to you. When or if you ever choose to move to the 8 precepts is up to you. It's your practice. It's your independent journey. But these will take you up several notches in terms of what you're practicing to be able to produce more clarity in the mind. And I went through each one of these in detail here in this chapter to explain what each one of them are, because each one of them are designed to help you eliminate certain pollutions of the mind. Those 10 fetters that exist in the mind, these are directly related to eliminating those in the mind. These aren't just interesting things to do. It's not rules, it's not commandments or anything like that, but it's helping you to eliminate the 10 fetters and specific fetters. So for example, this first one is exactly the same as the 5 precepts, where you're choosing not to kill, and that's helping you to eliminate the anger, hatred, or will in the mind. And then choosing not to steal, and all the other aspects of what the Buddha is explaining here about accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, and so forth, that this is helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. But here in the 8 precepts, rather than just not misusing sexual intercourse or sexual contact, here somebody's choosing to abstain from sexual contact. And in order to go from the second stage of enlightenment up to the third and ultimately the fourth, an individual will need to eliminate sexual contact. But when or if you choose to do that is your choice, because depending on your age, depending on your life, depending on what you've got going on in your life, you may or may not choose to do that at any particular certain time. But you can get to that first and second stage of enlightenment experiencing significant amount of peacefulness and still maintain a sexual relationship if you have a partner or if you would like to have a partner. And then at some point in the future, when or if you guys choose that you would like to move on and move further in your journey to enlightenment, you might choose to eliminate sexual contact. And here is where the Buddha is explaining that. And you can see how it relates to the fetters of sensual desire. That's the fetter, the same craving, desire, attachment that we're talking about here with the second precept. Ultimately, it's the same thing. When we talk about it as just in general, we talk about it as craving, desire, attachment. But when we talk about it in relation to the 10 fetters, we talk about it as sensual desire. That's where the craving is coming from. Not just sexual contact, but all craving. It's the mind longing and yearning through the senses, those 6 sense bases. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. The mind is wanting agreeable contact in order to get pleasant feelings. And sexual contact is one of those things that we do in the unenlightened state because we're longing and yearning for pleasant feelings. And it's through sexual contact that we stimulate all the senses and we get those pleasant feelings. But in order to get to enlightenment, where the mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy 100% of the time, you would need to eventually let go of sexual contact. Because if you've ever experienced having sex and you've experienced those pleasant feelings, there are certain situations where you want sex and you can't get it. And now the mind is agitated or annoyed or irritated. That irritation, that annoyance is because of the craving for sexual contact. So when you purify the mind and eliminate sensual desire 100%, you will no longer have longing and yearning and craving for sexual contact. Therefore, you can get to a point where your mind is permanently peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. But when or if you choose to do this is up to you, because one of the ways to extinguish a craving is to fulfill it. So if you have craving for sexual activity, you might need to play that out for a period of time, maybe a number of years, before you've kind of been there, done that enough, and felt like, you know what, I've done this enough times, I'm ready to let it go. And you gradually start letting it go. Because a lot of people, as they age, this will happen naturally anyway. There's very few people who are 80, 90 years old still having sex, right? But you might gradually decide to decrease your sexual activity, or you might more directly choose to work on that through practicing this particular precept. Then the 4th precept, it's the same as the 5 precepts. And this is also to abandon craving, desire, attachment, or sensual desire. Because the reason why the mind will typically lie and have false speech is because there are certain cravings that you're looking to get fulfilled. And now you will lie in order to get the objects of your affection, whatever that might be. Whether it's certain possessions, whether it's certain reputation, that you're looking to cultivate this reputation in the community, so you might lie about certain things. But the problem is that people are going to discover those lies. They're going to find out about them. So that's to help you eliminate sensual desire as well. Same thing with this 5th precept. This is the same as the 5 precepts. The elimination of substances that cause heedlessness. This is eliminating sensual desire, because there's a certain amount of craving through the tongue. Somebody who's drinking liquor or wine or taking other intoxicants, and there's certain longing through the mind. The mind's longing for pleasant feelings, and it wants to ingest this substance in order to get it. So by you choosing to no longer take in substances, not only are you eliminating sensual desire and reducing and eliminating your craving, desire, attachments, but you're also promoting more mindfulness and concentration in the mind. In order to get to enlightenment, you would need to have a certain awareness of the mind, and as long as there's substances on board, you're going to have an affected mind where you're not going to have the clarity and the crispness, you're not going to have the awareness and the concentration of the mind. Now, 6, 7, and 8 are additional precepts above and beyond the 5 precepts, and they're designed for specific reasons. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he taught his ordained practitioners to eat just once a day, and he did this for a number of reasons. The first thing is to eat in moderation. That's essentially what he's teaching here, and he's teaching in other parts of his teachings as well, because oftentimes the mind will have craving, desire, attachment, and when you're experiencing things like sadness or irritation or frustration, you might turn to food in order to get pleasant feelings. So you might turn to ice cream or chocolate or some other craving that you have because the mind's feeling sad, and now you're longing through the tongue to get that particular food, and that's going to kind of put the mind into these pleasant feelings, but you're not eliminating the craving that's causing those painful feelings. So by eating just once a day, you can ensure that you're not eating based on emotion, that you eat at a particular time in the day. But this isn't required for everybody to eat just once a day. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he taught it for this reason in order to get to enlightenment, but he also taught it for other reasons as well. Because in order for the household practitioners to support the ordained practitioners, if they were eating 3 times a day, that'd be an enormous amount of work for the household practitioners. So rather than indulging in sensual pleasures and gorging yourself on food, or the other side of that would be starving yourself, the Buddha taught to eat just once a day to lessen the burden of the body and the people around you to be able to support you in having this food. But as a household practitioner, you're going to need to probably eat more than once a day. There's some people who talk about the caloric value of food during the lifetime of the Buddha was much higher than it is now. So they were able to sustain themselves on 1 meal a day. And also think about what an ordained practitioner is doing. You know, they're walking, they're meditating, you know, they're sitting around studying the teachings of the Buddha. They're not doing the laborious work of a household practitioner. So a household practitioner might eat 2, 3, 4 times a day. But each time you eat, however many times, even if you eat 6 or 8 times a day, just be sure you eat in moderation and that you're not eating based on emotion. That's what you would like to get to. Then this teaching on abstaining from dancing, singing, instrumental music, unsuitable shows. This is all helping you to eliminate sensual desire. Because once again, when the mind is feeling sad or lonely or bored, your mind might long and yearn to go dance, sing, listen to music, and go to certain shows. And by doing this, your mind is not solving the real problem, which is the craving, desire, attachment. As long as you're filling up your life with these other things to kind of cover up the boredom and loneliness, for example, then you're not addressing the root cause, which is the craving, desire, attachment. So in an ordained lifestyle, they're going to eliminate these things 100%. But as a household practitioner, you might choose to eliminate them for a period of time in your life to train the mind that you don't need dancing, singing, music, and shows in order to eliminate boredom, because it actually doesn't eliminate boredom. It just covers it up. It's just a matter of time before you get bored again. But if you train the mind to not have craving, desire, attachment, when that boredom arises, and you can train the mind to eliminate that craving, desire, attachment, now you can liberate the mind from that craving, and you'll no longer experience the boredom or loneliness. But as long as you keep filling it up with dancing, singing, music, and shows, you're not going to be able to eliminate the boredom. It's only a temporary solution. And then your mind's going to be right back into it again. So if you go maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years without this kind of stuff, and you've trained your mind to no longer need it, then as a household practitioner, you might try to decide to bring this back in at some point. And you might listen to a little bit of music here and there, or you might do a little bit of dancing or other things like this every once in a while. And that would be completely normal, but by that point, you've already eliminated the cravings that are producing the boredom and loneliness. You've already potentially eliminated sensual desire. But as an ordained practitioner, they would continue to practice this precept. And then this other part of this precept, adorning and beautifying myself by wearing garlands and applying scents and fragrance. This is helping you to eliminate personal existence view. If you're wearing jewelry or makeup or perfumes or colognes and you're looking to beautify the body, there's a certain amount of personal existence view there that the mind is attempting to look a certain way when you go out into the public. There's a certain self-image that the mind's clinging to, or a certain self-identity. And this is part of that first fetter of personal existence view. And as long as your mind keeps clinging to this personal existence view, you're not going to be able to get to liberation. That if somebody says, "Oh, I think you're so beautiful, you're so handsome," you might get pleasant feelings. But then when you hear disagreeable things about your self-image or your self-identity, you'll feel painful feelings. So by you going out into the world without adorning and beautifying the body, and you can reside peaceful and joyful regardless, then you're training your mind to be able to exist without these things. And once again, an ordained practitioner will eliminate these 100%, but a household practitioner might decide to go for a period of time, maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years, without doing these things, training your mind to eliminate personal existence view. And then once you're confident that it's been eliminated, you might choose to bring these things back in for any number of reasons. Like if you went to a job interview and you wore a little bit of makeup or a little bit of jewelry or a little bit of nice clothing and had certain sense, maybe this would help you to get that job. But you're just doing it because you would like to kind of allow other people to understand that you're taking care of this physical body. Whereas if you walked in with your hair all scraggly and, maybe smelling a certain way, maybe it would be hard for you to get the job because maybe other people are judging you based on your appearance. Even though your mind isn't doing that, other people's mind might be doing that. So sometimes it might be wise for you to do these type of things, but you would like to get to a period of time where you can go out into the world without this and your mind can be peaceful and joyful regardless. Then this last one where the Buddha is talking about sleeping on high or luxurious beds. He talks about sleeping on the floor essentially. What this one is doing is helping you to eliminate conceit. One of those fetters, the eighth fetter, is arrogance or pride, measuring and comparing, judging people, putting yourself above or below people. That oftentimes if you sleep on a high luxurious bed, the mind will take on this conceit or this ego, this arrogance. And by you putting your sleeping location on the floor, you're training your mind to go down into the bed and get up out of the bed, and gradually over time it will help to wear away any kind of conceit. Here in Thailand, it's actually very challenging if you were to try to find a bed that's really high. Almost all the beds that you go to the stores, they're all very low because people understand this precept. So you would like to have your bed at your knee or lower. For me, I just put a mattress on the floor and I just sleep on the floor. I don't have a box spring. I don't have a frame. I don't have anything. It's just one mattress on the floor. And when you go down into bed and you get up out of bed, this is helping to wear away the conceits or the arrogance. So let me see what questions you guys have on this. It looks like Donnie has his hand up. If you'd like to go ahead, Donnie.
The Bhikkhu is asking on YouTube, why is gambling not part of the 8 precepts?
Gambling is part of the teachings of the Buddha and other parts of his teachings. He didn't make it part of the precepts, but it's other parts of his teachings. Why he chose to put it in one place versus another, only the Buddha knows that answer. But here, these are the significant things to work on. Gambling is something that an enlightened being would also need to eliminate. So it is part of the teachings. It's just not showing up here as part of the 8 precepts. Okay, looks like we have a question here in Zoom as well. I guess I'll go ahead and read this one. Question is doing healthy activities that are stressing the body beyond normal chores, exercising, not necessarily related to entertainment, okay, according to the Dhamma? I'm under the impression the monks don't do this. So what a ordained practitioner does in their lifestyle versus what a household practitioner does in their lifestyle is going to be different. And there's different reasons why that is. And it doesn't mean that you need to completely mimic what someone's doing in an ordained lifestyle in order to get enlightened in a household lifestyle. One of the reasons that ordained practitioners don't exercise typically, although they're starting to change that, is that if they were to exercise, it burns a whole lot of calories. And now the household practitioners are going to need to provide extra food in order to support that exercise. So they're choosing out of compassion and loving kindness for the household practitioners not to exercise in order to not put an extra burden on them to have them provide certain foods. But now, here in Thailand at least, the community is starting to realize that the ordained practitioners are fairly unhealthy and they're eating all these different foods that's given to them, and the food may or may not be healthy, and they're living a pretty sedentary lifestyle, that they're actually starting to put exercise equipment in some of the temples and allowing them to go ahead and exercise because it's really wise to keep the body healthy. And the Buddha used to exercise. He used to do long walks. He would go on these walks, and that's how he would exercise. So it's wise to make decisions to keep the physical body healthy. Without making those wise decisions, the physical body is going to become more and more unhealthy. And now, because of those unwise decisions, we'll experience those unwholesome results. So if you would like to exercise, you certainly can, and you can still get to enlightenment, but you would like to be sure you're not attached to it, that you're not longing, yearning for it. So for example, if you regularly exercise, say 3 times a week, and you miss a certain exercise, maybe Monday morning you miss your exercise, you shouldn't experience grumpiness or frustration or irritation because of that. If there's craving in the mind to exercise, when you miss your exercise time, you're going to be grumpy or irritable or agitated. But if you don't have craving, then you can maintain your peacefulness and your joy. Maybe you realize, okay, I didn't exercise in the morning, I'm going to try to exercise tonight, or maybe Tuesday instead. So if you were to long and yearn, if you were to like to exercise 6, 8, 10, 20 times a week, and you were doing that obsessively with craving, desire, attachment, this isn't going to be wise. But if you never exercise and never did anything for the physical body, this wouldn't be wise either. So the Buddha teaches this middle way. So if you'd like to exercise, go for it, but just be sure that you're not craving and desiring. Therefore, you're going to be irritated and grumpy when you're not exercising. And then also be sure that you don't allow conceit to come into the mind and look down on people who are choosing not to exercise, because sometimes the mind can become conceitful or boastful or arrogant when somebody is choosing to exercise, and they might look at themselves as being above others. There's almost, in some places, a certain competition in a gym and kind of looking down on others or things like this, and you're not interested in either of those things occurring. So if you can exercise and train your mind to not have craving and to not have conceit, you're just making these wise decisions to exercise the body and gain health. That would be very wise, and that would be the middle way. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any other questions here. So we'll move on to the next one. You can see here I described the 8 precepts in quite a bit of detail to help you here. So that's something that you can read. Now we go to chapter 47. Looks like Max has his hand up. If you'd like to go ahead, Max.
Yes, sir. 10 courses of unwholesome karma. Impurity of body, kunda, is threefold. Impurity by speech is fourfold. Impurity by mind is threefold. And how kunda is impurity by body threefold. Here, someone destroys life. He is murderous, blood-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. He takes what is not given. He steals the wealth and property of others in the village or forest. He engages in sexual misconduct. He has sexual relations with women who are protected by their mothers and fathers, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by their teachings, who have a husband whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one already engaged. It is in this way that impurity by body is threefold. And how kunda is impurity by speech fourfold. 1, here someone speaks falsehood. If he is summoned to a council, to an assembly, to his relatives' presence, to his club, or to the court, and questioned as a witness thus, so, good man, tell what you know. Then not knowing, he says, I know, or knowing, he says, I do not know. Not seeing, he says, I see, or seeing, he says, I do not see. Thus, he knowingly speaks falsehood for his own benefit, or for another's benefit, or for some insignificant worldly benefit. 2, he speaks argumentatively. Having heard something here, he repeats it elsewhere in order to divide those people from these. Or having heard something elsewhere, he repeats it to these people in order to divide them from those. Thus, he is one who divides those who are united, a creator of divisions, one who enjoys separation, rejoices in separation, finds pleasure in separation, a speaker of words that create separation. 3, he speaks harshly. He speaks such words as are rough, hard, hurtful to others, offensive to others, bordering on anger, unconducive to concentration. 4, he indulges in idle chatter. He speaks at an improper time, speaks falsely, speaks what is unbeneficial, speaks opposite to the teachings and the discipline. At an improper time, he speaks such words as are unwise, unreasonable, rambling, and unbeneficial. It is in this way that impurity by speech is fourfold. And how, Kunda, is impurity by mind threefold? 1, here someone is full of longing, craving. He longs, craves for the wealth and property of others thus, oh, may what belongs to another be mine. 2, he has a mind of ill will and intentions of hate thus, may these beings be slain, slaughtered, cut off, destroyed, or obliterated. 3, he holds wrong view, ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and has an incorrect perspective thus. There is nothing given, nothing sacrificed, nothing offered. There is no fruit or result of wholesome and unwholesome actions. There is no this world, no other world. There is no mother, no father. There are no beings spontaneously reborn. There are in the world no ascetics and Brahmins of right conduct and right practice who, having realized this world and other world for themselves by direct knowledge, experience, make them known to others. It is in this way that impurity by mind is threefold. These, Kunda, are the 10 courses of unwholesome karma. It is because people engage in these 10 courses of unwholesome karma that hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits and other bad destinations are seen.
All right. Thank you, Max. So here the Buddha is taking what he teaches in the Eightfold Path as moral conduct, and he's really expanding on it and helping you see a lot more details of this natural law of karma and how there's certain things that we could do that produce unwholesome karma. And remember, this is just the results of our decisions, of cause and effect, in that when we make wise decisions, we experience wholesome results. When we make unwise decisions, we experience unwholesome results. So in the Eightfold Path, there's that section on wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. So here, when he's talking about impurity by body, what he's essentially talking about is right action. If you look at right action in the Eightfold Path, there's 3 aspects to it. There's the part about killing, about stealing, and sexual misconduct. But there's other actions too, like what we were just talking about in our previous chapter about gambling. Gambling is a bodily action that causes harm. There's also substances that cause heedlessness. That's a bodily action that's going to lead to a certain type of harm. So while the Buddha teaches in certain teachings, you can understand his other teachings plug into those things. So with the Eightfold Path being the core central teaching, he's going to explain things to a certain level of detail, but then there's other details that he shares in other parts of his teachings that plug into it. So he's layering the teachings to help you address some of the more major things at certain times in your practice. And then when you get deeper and deeper and deeper into his teachings, you can get that granular level that's helping you to understand. So here he's taking you into a deeper level of detail and showing you these unwholesome things that are occurring based on bodily conduct. And then he's talking about speech or communication, and he's explaining that in a lot more detail above and beyond what he's explained in some of his other teachings. And then he explains the mind. So the mind here is He's talking about craving, anger, and ignorance, these three poisons or these three unwholesome roots or these three fires. And he's explaining to you in detail under this one about ignorance, since we're talking about Kama here, he's talking essentially about someone who doesn't understand the natural law of Kama. If somebody doesn't understand the natural law of Kama, there's no way for them to be able to make wise decisions to get to improved results in their life. So he's explaining that in a lot of detail here. And eventually he starts to explain how that it's because of these 10 courses of unwholesome Kama that people are reborn into the lower realms. He never used rebirth as a carrot to try to help you get to enlightenment or to try to encourage you to get to a heavenly rebirth, for example, because the goal is to extinguish all your unwise decisions and your unwholesome Kama so that you can get to enlightenment in this life, not to experience rebirth. And he never used guilt, shame, or fear in the lower realms to try to fear you into learning his teachings, but he's just explaining the natural laws to help you see that when you conduct yourself in this way, you're going to produce unwholesome Kama, and that's why beings are reborn in hell, the animal realm, and afflicted spirits. And in those realms, which we've all been in before, but we made our way out of those realms into the human realm, once we're in those lower realms, you can't get to enlightenment from those lower realms. You would need to be reborn into a human or heavenly existence in order to get to enlightenment. And in those lower realms, it's like being trapped in a prison. For example, like the animal realm, that you have to kill in some animal existences in order to eat and sustain your life. So you're really stuck because you're constantly killing, you're stealing, you're having sexual misconduct in the animal realm. You're just constantly doing that over and over and over again. So it's very challenging to get to an improved rebirth once a being is in the animal realm. But we've all been there, and we've now experienced the results of improved decision making that we eventually made it to the human realm. And now once we're here, we should take advantage of this opportunity to learn and practice in order to get to enlightenment and not do things that would lead us back to the lower realms, because once we're there, it's like being stuck again. It's going to take countless rebirths to ever get back to a human existence or a heavenly existence again. What questions do you guys have on this? Looks like Max has his hand up. If you'd like to go ahead, Max.
I just had a question. Who is Kunda?
This is a household practitioner, if I remember correctly, that is studying with the Buddha. So he's one of his students that is learning with the Buddha.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we must not have any questions in Facebook or YouTube. So moving on to this next chapter, we don't necessarily need to read this. This is chapter 48. It's exactly the opposite of the chapter we just read. Where the chapter we just read talks about unwholesome Kama, this one talks about wholesome Kama and how to practice body, speech, and mind in a way that leads to wholesome results. And the Buddha talks about not killing, not stealing, not having sexual misconduct. He talks about not having false speech and lying. He talks about not having argumentative speech. He talks about eliminating harsh speech and idle chatter. He talks about eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance, and he describes that in detail. And then he explains that practicing in this way leads to rebirth in the heavenly realm and in the human realm. This is how one would experience rebirth into these realms. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter, chapter 48? Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to chapter 49. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, go ahead, Donnie. Or Punya, if you'd like to read. Go ahead, Punya.
Yes, I will try. The benefits from reciting processes of virtue. Monks recite processes of virtue, practicing moral conduct. Processes of the training guidelines restrains with the restraints of the training guidelines, perfects in conduct and cause of action in a difficult situation, and seeing danger in the slightest faults, trained by undertaking the training precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I be dear and agreeable to my companions in the holy life, respected and admired by them, Let him fulfill the precepts. Be devoted to internal serenity of mind, not neglect meditation. Be possessed of wisdom and reside in empty hearts. If a monk should aspire, may the service of those whose work earns food, resting peace, and medicinal supplies are used bring them great fruit and benefit. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, when my kinsmen and relatives who have passed away and died remember me with confidence in their minds, may that bring them great fruit and great benefit. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I become a conqueror of sadness and excitement, and may sadness and excitement not conquer me. May I reside transcending sadness and excitement whenever they arise. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I become a conqueror of fear and dread, and may fear and dread not conquer me. May I reside transcending fear and dread whenever they arise. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I become one to attain at will, without trouble or difficulty, the four jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a peaceful residing here and now. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I with the reduction of three fetters becomes a stream enter, no longer subject to hell, bound or liberation, headed for enlightenment. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk choose aspire, may I, with the destruction of three fetters and with the fading of craving, anger, and ignorance, become a once returner, returning once to this world to make an end of discontentedness. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk choose aspire, may I, with the destruction of five lower fetters, become due to reappear spontaneously in the heavenly realm, and there attain final nibbana, final enlightenment, without ever returning from that world. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I, while the various kinds of supernormal power, let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk choose aspire, may I understand the minds of other beings, of other persons, having encompassed them with my own mind. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I remember my countless past life. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I with the divine eye, third eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, see beings passing away and reappearing. Let him fulfill the precepts. If a monk should aspire, may I, realizing for myself with direct knowledge, experience here and now, enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are tenuous with the destruction of the tens. Let him fulfill the precepts. Be devoted to internal serenity of mind, not neglect meditation. Be possessed of wisdom and reside in empty hearts. So is what with reference to this that it was said, monks reside possessors of virtue, practice moral conduct, possessors of the training guidelines, restrain with the reset of the training guideline, perfect in conduct and cause of action in a difficult situation, and seeing danger in the slightest false trained by undertaking the training precepts. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Punya. So here, this particular teaching is connecting the precepts to the results. That yes, you're not causing harm to others through practicing the precepts, so therefore harm is not coming to you. But as I mentioned, you're also purifying the mind. You're eliminating more and more of the pollution of mind by practicing those precepts. And the Buddha is explaining step by step here about the certain results that you experience as a result of practicing those precepts. So if you aspire for any of these aspects that he's describing, he's saying, okay, practice the precepts. That's how you actually get to the results that he's explaining here. By restraining the mind, by practicing these training guidelines. Sometimes people look at the precepts and other teachings as rules, and I don't advise anybody to ever look at the teachings of the Buddha as rules, because you're not going to get to enlightenment by following a bunch of rules. But when you cultivate the wisdom around the natural law of Gama and you see for yourself the truth and the wisdom of this natural law, now you'll naturally make wiser decisions based on that wisdom, not because you're just checking off rules and following rules, because following rules doesn't promote wisdom in the mind. It doesn't allow you to make wise decisions and uproot the pollution. But when you're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify and practice, now you're uprooting the pollution and you're getting the real results, which is what the Buddha is describing here. Do you guys have any questions on this chapter? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll go to the last chapter for today, which is chapter 50. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, perhaps I should read this one because Donnie let me know that his battery's getting low on his laptop, so he probably isn't interested in having his battery go out while in the middle of reading. So I'll go ahead and read this one. So it's titled, To Obtain a Straight Destination in Rebirth. Monks, beings are the owners of their Gama, the heirs of their Gama. They have Gama as their origin, Gama as their relative, Gama as their resort. Whatever Gama they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. Here, having abandoned the destruction of life, someone abandons the destruction of life, with the rod and weapon laid down, dedicated and kindly. He resides compassionate towards all living beings. He is not secretive by body, speech, and mind. His bodily Gama is straight, his verbal Gama is straight, his mental Gama is straight. His destination is straight, his rebirth is straight. But for one with a straight destination in rebirth, I say, there is one of two destinations, either the exclusively pleasant heavens or influential families in the human realm, such as those of affluent Khatyas, affluent Brahmins, or affluent householders, families that are rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and belongings, abundant wealth and grain. Thus, a being is reborn from a being. One is reborn from one's deeds. When one has been reborn, contacts affect one. It is in this way, I say, that beings are the heirs of their Gama. The Tathagata spoke of abandoning of taking what is not given and abandoning sexual misconduct with discourses similar to that of abandoning taking of life. So here the Buddha is just explaining how by you practicing good, wholesome moral conduct, if there is going to be rebirth, that you're going to have this improved rebirth, that you're not going to move down into the lower realms, but you would see that as there is rebirth, that you'll be reborn into a better and better and improved existence. And one of those improved existences that he's talking about is either in the heavenly realm or in influential families where you have access to resources. Because one of the challenges that we experience in the human realm that we need to overcome as an obstacle is being able to provide for our food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. This is oftentimes an obstacle for many humans, that we have difficulties acquiring those things. So if one is practicing good, wholesome moral conduct in this life, and they need to experience rebirth, then this rebirth can occur into a wealthy family where you have less difficulties to acquire the basic necessities that you need. Thus, it frees you up to then be able to learn and practice to train the mind and get to enlightenment. And of course, sometimes rich and wealth can be an obstacle as well. So when you look at people that are reborn into wealthy families, this is the reason why. Because of conduct that they had in their previous lives. But also, people who are reborn into rich and wealthy families, they have obstacles to overcome as well. And oftentimes they can potentially struggle, just like beings that are not in rich and wealthy families can struggle as well. But this would be an improvement upon a rebirth where someone is having a lot of difficulty acquiring the basic necessities of life. That by being reborn into a wealthy family, you no longer have that obstacle to overcome, and now you can potentially dedicate time, effort, energy, and resources towards learning and practicing the teachings to get to enlightenment and end the whole cycle of rebirth. Are there any questions on this particular chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in YouTube, and I don't see any in Facebook or Zoom either. So you guys must be understanding this to a certain degree. And I'll just kind of close up our class today with thanking all of you for coming to class and dedicating your time, effort, and energy towards learning and practicing the teachings, because as you learn and practice, it's helping you, it's helping those close to you, and it's helping all of humanity as you improve the condition of your mind. By gaining this wisdom in class, you can now reflect on that to independently verify it and then practice. And through your practice, you're going to experience improved results in your life by making wiser and wiser decisions. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're in chapter 8 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Chapter 8 is titled Transforming the Three Poisons, Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. Here I'm going to explain to you the problems of craving, anger, and ignorance, what they produce in the mind, and what you experience in your life as a result of having these pollutions in the mind. And then I'm going to provide you the solutions of how to uproot them and eliminate them from the mind. And that's where you experience enlightenment and liberation, is by eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance. Then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation, and I'll be coming together with you guys to encourage, support, and motivate you. All of us coming together as a community, you can meditate together, and you can ask any and all questions that you like. It's an open session of any and all questions, any miscellaneous or random questions that you might have. You're welcome to ask those during the time of our Wednesday class. So thank you all, those of you guys that read, thank you for your questions. Thank you for those who are just attending this either live or on the replay. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.